Good morning. It's Wednesday, April 1st, and I hope that you're ready for today's history lecture. First and foremost, t-shirt of the day, SWAT like Watt. Shout out to my favorite Texan. I hope that you are all doing well. I hope this week is going smoothly for you. Before we pick up with our lesson, I want to talk about your video lectures. Many people keep on emailing me and saying, I promised I watched my lecture and all that. It's okay. You don't have to tell me that you've watched your lecture. It's not a graded assignment. All you have to do is watch it. And if you click turn in or submit, whatever the button says on there, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. The only reason I like to do it as an assignment is because it shows up here on the upcoming part. So it kind of gives you a due date, and I like that. So don't worry if you turn it in or not, just as long as you watch it. That's okay. That's the only reason why I've made it an assignment. It is not graded. Also, concerning your reading assessments, I have been counting them as a completion grade. However, if I notice, because I can check your answers, if I notice that people are just clicking an answer to get through, and they're not really taking the time to answer the questions correctly, then I might start grading those for accuracy as well. So make sure that you're taking the time to read through your book, and you can use your book to answer those questions. Just make sure that you're doing it well and to the best of your ability, because it will help you on a quiz. Okay, so let's pick up with our lesson today. This is on page 423. We're picking up with the rise of the KKK. And this is on page 423 under responses to declining morality. Now, there were, like we said, there were groups of people in the society during the Roaring Twenties that began to just give in to their inhibitions, began living immoral lifestyles. And there was a response from conservative groups in America. Some responses were to pray, continue to go to church, try to be an influence on those around them. Others, it was more of an angry response to a new culture that was making them feel uncomfortable. And that violent response, that incorrect response, one of them was the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan. We've already talked about the Ku Klux Klan, how it was started during Reconstruction in order to prevent African Americans from voting and to oppress African Americans and intimidate them. Well, now they kind of broaden their range of their hatred. Now they not only hate African Americans, but they also hate Roman Catholics, and they also hate immigrants. And so the KKK begins to reemerge, and they also continue to use their violence tactics of beating people into intimidation or intimidating them. They also use murders. They murder a good amount of people during this time to create this intimidation factor, to bring people into submission. Now, the Ku Klux Klan, in order to grow, they knew that they needed to reach a broader demographic. And so they reach out to conservative Christians. And they do this by mixing racism with patriotism and Christian symbols. And so they almost make it look like this Christian religion, like a club with the Christian religion. And they really reached out to poor and middle-class white Americans. And they said, hey, you're feeling uncomfortable with everything that's going on in society? We are too. We need to fight against immigration. We need to fight against African Americans and what they're trying to subvert, our culture. We need to fight against Roman Catholics, and we need to try to reestablish the conservative Christian foundation that this country was built upon. Those were all false teaching points with the KKK. And so because they tried to mix in religion with their evil philosophies, the KKK actually becomes a false religion that gets put out there. And there were many white Americans who were led astray by this false religion of the Ku Klux Klan. And by the way, the things that I was saying about fighting against African American, that was all from their point of the KKK's point of view. Okay, just putting that out there. All right, so there was also a response, though, to the rise of the KKK. Many African Americans began moving to the north so that they would live in an area that was more accepting of their race. And the African American population begins to grow in a lot of these cities to the point where they actually have a lot of political voice in the north, which is wonderful and great. However, in the African American community, there were two philosophies as to how they should deal with racism. In your textbook on page 424, there was a man by the name of Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey espoused this idea that white Americans were never going to be able to get over their racist ideologies. And he said, we're never going to achieve equality or peace. He goes, so what we just need to do as African Americans, we just need to completely separate. And we should be fine with segregation. We should have our own culture. We should have our own way of living and just be on our own. And segregation is fine and it's good. Then you had a man by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. He helped establish an organization that is still in existence to this day, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP is what it's commonly referred to as today. Now, the NAACP was created in order to challenge laws and use litigation or go to court whenever there were laws that were enacted that violated the 14th and 15th Amendments. If you remember, the 14th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote, it guaranteed citizenship to African Americans. The 15th Amendment giving African Americans suffrage or the right to vote. And the NAACP also published a journal called Crisis. And Crisis, what it did, readers of Crisis would be able to read about racial problems in America and be able to read about these laws that were challenging the 14th and 15th Amendments. It was keeping people up to date concerning the racism fight or the fight against racism in America. We also see a huge attack on Christian philosophy, and not just Christian philosophy as a whole, but liberalism. Being able to have different opinions, being able to teach different theories in the classroom. Up until this point in the 1920s, many states had declared that it was illegal to teach evolution in the classroom, and this is in public schools. Now, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, which is still in existence today and is an ardent opponent of Christianity and Christian philosophies, the ACLU wanted to test these laws that prohibited teachers from teaching evolution. Now, before I go on, I want to talk about this. I do not agree with evolution. However, I don't think it's wrong to talk about evolution. What are its main talking points? What that does, and I believe that Mrs. Garner teaches about the theory of evolution, not as fact, but she teaches that so that we understand why or what people that believe in evolution, what they believe. And how we as Christians, and when she teaches from a Christian perspective, teaches some holes in that argument, in the theory of evolution, and looks at it from a biblical perspective as to why this probably, or why this is not true. So I think it's fine to talk about different ideologies and talk about different philosophies. I do it all the time in my class. I talk about socialism. I talk about what people believe in socialism and why they want it. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I don't think it's wrong if people teach about the theory of evolution. And I don't think it's wrong if they teach creation too. The problem is whenever people say, we're only going to teach about evolution because it's fact and it's true and everything else is wrong. Why not talk about the different theories? And why not talk about the talking points of others? But what's great about a Christian school and what you're able to receive is that you not only learn about the theory of evolution, but you look at it from a biblical perspective. Okay, and you're able to look at the Bible. What does the Bible say about this? And so, anyway, the ACLU, they wanted to put this law to the test. And so there was a businessman in the town of Dayton, Tennessee, that said, if we were to convince a school teacher to teach evolution, then it would bring a lot of business to our little town of Dayton, Tennessee if it went to trial. And so they convinced a man by the name of John Scopes, he was a biology teacher in Dayton, Tennessee, to teach evolution in his class. And it says in your textbook, I think this is interesting, it says that he taught from a school-approved textbook that contained information about evolution. So that's what's interesting in the first place. If it's illegal to teach about evolution, why does the school approve a textbook that has teachings about evolution in it? But anyway, John Scopes teaches about evolution. He's arrested for violating this law and put on trial. And the trial became a huge hit because it was put on radio. And so the defendant, John Scopes, was defended by a lawyer by the name of Clarence Darrow. And William Jennings Bryan was the prosecutor, the man who was trying to convince the jury to find Scopes guilty. Now, while Jennings Bryan ended up technically winning the case in the trial, John Scopes was found guilty, fined $100. It was not a win for fundamental Christianity, sadly. Clarence Darrow called William Jennings Bryan to the stand in order to question him and cross-examine him. And so he brought William Jennings Bryan up there, and he began to just mercilessly pound him with questions about the Bible and about creation, calling on William Jennings Bryan to defend the Genesis account. And William Jennings Bryan failed. While he was a defender of the faith, he was by no means a biblical scholar. And he defended the Genesis creation account terribly. He really looked like a fool while he was up on the stand, which caused, in effect, people who were listening to this and watching the trial in person, it made them think, man, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Clarence Darrow, he's making some good points. How is that possible? In Genesis 1:1. And it brought a lot of people to the point where they were questioning the Bible's legitimacy. And so while John Scopes was found guilty and it was a win for Jennings Bryan effectively made Christianity look foolish to the public. And so this is where we begin to see a turning point in society, where now the culture of America looked more favorably upon evolution than creation. And so it's a sad day for Christianity and its legitimacy in the eyes of the public in America. All right, so that's the Scopes trial. And I do want to just clarify, I do not believe in evolution, okay? I do not believe in macro, okay, evolution there. And you've had this conversation in science class already. I do think, though, that it's not bad to talk about all different opinions and then compare them to the Bible. So just putting that out there so you don't think that I'm a huge proponent of evolution or anything like that. All right, so that is it for today. You have a test on Monday. We'll finish the chapter on Thursday, then review with Quizlet Live on Friday. Poll question of the day. And this was brought about by a dream I just had last night. It was a nightmare. We were looking at houses, and in one of these houses, there were black widows everywhere, like coming down from the ceiling. It was a horrible, horrible nightmare. So that brings me to this poll question. What phobia do you have? What are you most scared of? All right, and so let's keep it classroom appropriate. I'll post this on the stream page, and you can post your answers underneath that question. I hope that you have a great rest of the day. I'm praying for you and your family to stay safe and healthy. God bless.